In Civ 6 or Civilization 6, every era is an art form. Whether it be slicing heads off with a sword or obliterating them with artillery rounds all the way from Narnia, each era brings different units and methods to send the AI to a permanent meet and greet with the dinosaurs. But which unit is the objective best for each era? The Ancient Era in Civ 6 is the one era in the game where no unit is truly good. You're most of the time going to be able to rush cities about as fast as I filled out my taxes this year. This early on in the game is better spent preparing for future attacks after you learn how to master iron or hump horses. The honorable mention is going to be the warrior. With only 3 real units to choose from and another sorry excuse being the spearman, the warrior is an all-around menace available from turn 1. The warrior is also 25 production cheaper than the heavy chariot, so the difference of 8 combat strength isn't as glaring. Not to mention the warrior will be able to get earlier promotions and has a better early game upgrade path due to the fact swordline units can use battering rams, whereas cavalry cannot, making melee the better unit up until the Renaissance. The other bonus the warrior gets over other ancient era units is oligarchy. Being able to get another 4 combat strength in all situations makes them almost as strong as the heavy chariot, while being cheaper than buying groceries with food stamps. Overall, the warrior is going to be the backbone of your army from turn 1, with a great all-around upgrade path, leaving them as the Ancient Era's honorable mention. But they aren't the best Ancient Era unit in Civilization 6. That distinction belongs to the Archer. The Archer is undoubtedly, no questions asked, the best unit, and you'd have an easier time arguing for flat Earth theory than trying to disprove Archers being the absolute goats. Archers have 2 range, meaning they can attack twice before anyone else gets close, and their melee strength, while weak, isn't as bad as the Slingers, and they will always win a one-on-one engagement with any unit from the Ancient Era. Finally, their ability to be garrisons is essential to early game defense, especially with the godly 10 combat strength from City Center promotion, making them almost unstoppable on the defensive. But in the early game, they also do decent damage to cities and even walls if they're built early enough. They are all-around monsters, able to do anything for 60 production, which might be even more expensive than the warrior, but unlike the chariot, the range and strength makes it worth it, as they are absolute assassins and the best unit in the era. Finally, their tech path is extremely good and easy to get. Animal humpingry is never a bad option, and killing a unit with a slinger is the easiest thing you can do. The best unit in not only the Ancient Era, but the entire game. The Classical Era in Civ 6 is where things really get rolling. With multiple strong options and city sieging ability, the Classical Era is probably the best time to commit no-lifing everyone around you, due to the fact that units become stronger, and simultaneously the AI still probably hasn't formulated a defense plan, with most cities not even having walls. So which units are the best at seizing the moment? With only 3 land units, the Horseman gets the honorable mention. The Horseman is 1 combat strength stronger than the Swordsman with 4 move speed at a similar cost. The problem? Well, there's 4 really. 1, the Horseman can't use oligarchy. 2, the Horseman can't use battering rams. 3, they have a bad promotion pathway compared to melee units. And finally, 4, you can't upgrade into Horsemen, you have to hard build them, making things a little bit slower. However, the Eureka path is a lot easier to get than the Swordsman, so you can research them a lot sooner. The Horseman is a very strong option until the AI gets walls, because at that point your conquest is going to grind to a halt. While running around and pillaging everything is a great way to get benefits and increase war wariness, you are going to mostly want to take cities early on to begin the snowball, and with Horsemen getting all but neutered by walls, they aren't even close to the best unit, although they're not bad in their own right. The best unit in the Classical Era in Civilization 6 is undoubtedly the Swordsman. These freaks of nature can use the battering ram, better promotions, oligarchy, and upgrade from warriors, making them weaker than horsemen at the start, but with enough boosts they become supercharged menaces that obliterate everything in their path. These guys are the perfect unit to get, with 2 move speed being their only weakness, which can be made up for with a great general. But the biggest problem, in my opinion, is the fact that their tech path is a lot harder to get than you would think. With mining into bronze and iron working, you need to wipe out 3 barbs early on, which can be difficult as that's really RNG dependent. And if you let barbs get scouts to the encampment to spawn enough units, you're going to potentially deal with more units than you can handle, slowing down conquest even further. Overall, with minor weaknesses, the swordsman is the best unit in the classical era. The medieval era in Civilization 6 is just a big crossover, bigger than Endgame even, with classical and ancient era fan favorites coming back for a second round. With 2 cavalry, 2 melee, and 1 ranged unit, there are lots of options to pick from, so we're going to be using a similar criteria to the first 2 eras. The honorable mention is going to be a tie between crossbowmen and knights. Both these units are strong in their own rights with some weaknesses. The crossbowman has to suffer from stronger city attacks as well as more cavalry on the field, so they aren't as good in this era as archers were in the ancient. But they are still the only ranged unit that is good and not siege, so in defensive positions and situations, the crossbowman is your best option. The knight is for all the way offensive firepower as the strongest combat strength unit in the era, and they pack a bigger beating than my dad after that time I shit on the carpet. But again, without being able to make use of battering rams, these guys are absolutely useless against walled cities, which at this point is going to be everywhere. So they also get the honorable mention. The best unit you might have guessed is the man-at-arms. The newest unit in the era is also the strongest with 45 combat strength and the ability to use siege towers with a damn good promotion tree in which you should have 2 to 3 already. These guys are monsters and can continue your classical era push you started with swordsmen without missing a step. The best thing about these guys is they come earlier than cavalry units, and since you already had swordsmen, at least you should have, you don't need to spend iron to upgrade them, which would slow you down as the knight conquest does to a snail's pace. Overall, the melee unit wins again, as the other siege-using pikeman is best used as emergency toilet paper if Corona flares up again. With man-at-arms being a jack-of-all-trades, the only thing comparable to their sheer destructive power is the power of a TheCivLifeR subscriber to not only get the ability to fly and shoot lasers from your penis, but to also not miss out on future content, as I have a big 1 barbarian encampment on every tile video coming out in the next couple of days, so subscribe to not miss out on that. Before we continue, I want to hear from you guys down below which units you think are the strongest and whether you want me to make a weakest unit for each era. The Renaissance really switches things up from the last 3 eras with siege towers and rams not having a Renaissance equivalent. Melee units fall from their mighty totem as the Big Daddy, as there is a new challenger approaching for that top spot of mass killer connoisseur. Instead of a best and honorable mention, there's going to be a sort of tie, with only 3 units and the pike and shot still being garbage, as there isn't even a Renaissance-era cavalry unit in the first place, making them worse than actual useless. But the other 2 are the bombard and the musketman. Now, they come almost immediately with the bombard coming in later and being more expensive. However, if the AI gets Renaissance walls, then bombards are the best unit due to them being the only thing that can damage those walls effectively. Unless you have more units than China has citizens, you aren't damaging Renaissance walls without bombards, making potentially the best Renaissance unit in the game. But if the AI doesn't have Renaissance walls, then you go for musketmen who are cheaper, stronger, and can still use siege towers to great effect as long as the AI didn't upgrade their walls. So it does depend, but overall I'm going to give it to the musketmen early until the walls come up, in which the bombards take the lead. The industrial era has 3 units, but this time the melee unit doesn't even take the honorable mention slot, due to them not having the advantage of siege towers anymore, making the cheaper, faster cavalry unit take their place. How the mighty have fallen. The honorable mention goes to the field cannon. They still have 2 range as well as pack a massive punch, and if you've kept your archers alive until now, then these dudes probably have 3 promotions already, making them veterans in the art of shirt making. Their biggest problem though is the unit that comes in the same era. Both cavalry units have 4 or 5 move speed, making them faster than my dad when he left to get the milk with no zone of control hampering them, making field cannons sitting ducks unless they are completely protected. So in defense, they are a lot better and the best industrial era defensive unit in general, which gives them the honorable mention spot. But for offensive, there's only one option. The best industrial era unit is the cavalry, who takes the spot over the cuirassier for one reason: movement speed. Despite being weaker than Cuirassiers by 2 combat strength, it has another 1 move speed, meaning it is fast, and can come in and pillage multiple tiles in a turn, giving you the yields, reducing city combat strength, and still being strong enough to be effective as the heavy cavalry counterpart. The line infantry is the worst actual non-scout line unit in the game. They are the strongest, sure, but they are also the slowest, and having cavalry run around, killing ranged units, and pillaging tiles is a worthy trade-off. Plus, they are 30 production more expensive, so that's another 1 turn you have to wait, along with Niter at this point being a lot harder and newer to get than either Iron or Horses. The modern era has one huge surprise you're not expecting, but one I'm also sure you'll agree with after I explain, with an obvious choice on who the number 1 spot is. The honorable mention I'm talking about is the Observation Balloon. That is right, in this era of fast-moving units, railroads, and even planes, siege units might as well be stuck butt naked in a washing machine in your favorite adult movie, because they get stuck easier than you would think. With that, you want them to be protected, as even planes in this era aren't exactly sliced bread. The balloon gives all siege units 1 range, putting them outside the city's attack range. Yup, it's that time again. As long as you keep them protected from other units like tanks, they can shred cities without getting attacked back, making them one of the most important units in this era, despite being more neglected than my VODs channel. The best unit is the tank in the modern era in Civilization 6. These guys have 85 combat strength after getting some armor. That strength and 4 move speed makes up for the 50 production cost increase from the infantry, and with the right promotions, they are literally unstoppable. They cost oil, sure, but so do infantry and artillery and even planes at this stage, so the cost is pretty much negligent. The only other challenger really is the biplane, which, while strong, has limited range, meaning they aren't as effective with a limited range of operations, whereas the tank can blitz everything in sight, especially with a great general. Their combined mobility and strength makes them the best unit for this era. The Atomic Era in this game is the best era for warmongers, as this is the era in which atomic weapons become available, that one-shot almost anything. But with this era also comes 2 new challengers that change the game completely. Planes. With them both coming into service, siege and ranged units are left with their dick in their hands, not sure what to do next, as their jobs are done much better by planes. The honorable mention goes to the fighter, mainly because the boomer is stronger and the AI doesn't like building planes for some reason. These 2 reasons coupled together makes the fighter the honorable mention, although they do become better once the AI gets out some of its own planes to both intercept enemy bombers and launch dogfights against fighters, making them all around behemoths. They do require aluminum at this stage, which is the second hardest resource to find, but they become necessary once you realize that nukes require air superiority. All of this makes not only fighters, but planes in general the kings of the Atomic Era, as they are necessary to every aspect of warfare in this game. But the better of the 2 is definitely the boomer. These guys are disgustingly strong with a massive ranged attack, and most units not even able to fight back. I strongly believe that 1 bomber can take out 10-to-1 unit invasions on its own. That's how strong these freaks are. Built more different than my rectum after some Taco Bell, these guys change the game, as not only do you need to get them to make sure domination runs as smooth as possible, but you also need to plan against them, as even the AI, yes, that AI, the ones who run warriors into fortified swordsmen, can make great use of planes, as can anyone, honestly. Overall, the Atomic Era is the era of the plane, as these menaces take complete control of warfare. The final era sees planes become less relevant as we bring in a new unit type for each class, making this the most packed era. But there is one predator more dangerous than EDP or Lion Maker in this era that is the overall strongest unit in this era and the entire game. The honorable mention is going to be the Jet Bomber, as still the strongest conventional unit. Even with mobile SAMs, these guys can still pack a huge punch, although at this stage you have to be a little more careful, as the stray AI jet fighter can one-shot your bomber, and anti-air can be extremely dangerous, as they aren't the strong city-taking behemoths they were in the last era. but overall they still obliterate most units without taking damage back, and I was close to giving the spot to the jet fighter, but the fact that the AI won't build the required fighters or anti-air gives a slight advantage to the jet bomber, making them the second strongest unit of this era. And finally, the best unit of this era is the giant death robot. They are resistant to nuclear weapons, air units, and can fight on water, land, or air. They're pretty much Superman, and nothing counters these monsters with even a ranged attack for devastating effect. But the best part? There are no new units after this point. Unless, of course, you're talking about the giant death robot upgrades. Yup, that's right. The upgrades make these units of mass destruction even better than they already are as the best unit of the era, as they will be able to absolutely obliterate anything in their path and only get stronger as the eras go on. There is nothing better than this unit in the entire game, and they make everyone from planes to conventional units look like cheap toys you'd buy from the Dollar Tree, with their strength, just like the average CivLifeR subscriber, being insurmountable.